Right, Fausto.
Foster Burrell, Public Works Director, Town of Marana.
Hey, Jamie Brown.
Good morning, everybody. Jamie Brown, Director of Strategic Planning, Programming, and Policy with PAG.
Adam Ledford.
Good morning, everybody. Adam Ledford, Policy and Program Coordinator for PAG.
Brian Cow.
Hello, everybody. Brian Cow, Transportation Planner with Kimley Horn.
Welcome, Brian. Chris Johannes.
Morning, everyone. Chris Joannes, Consultant Project Manager from Kimley Horn on the Regional Active Transportation Plan.
All right. Dr. Hansu No.
Hey, good morning. Hansuno here at PAC. Thank you.
Thanks, Hansu. Jason Bahi.
Jason Bahi, Transportation Manager for the Pasquiyaki tribe.
Thanks, Jason. Jennifer Hobart.
Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Hobart with ADOT Multimodal Planning Division, Regional Planner.
Good morning. Josue, sorry.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Josue Licea, City of South Tucson.
Thanks, Josue. It's good to see you. Catherine.
Hi, everyone. Catherine Skinner, Pima County Transportation.
Good morning, Catherine. And Mariate.
Good morning. I'm Mariate Echeverri with Kimley Horn. I'm the Transit Planner and Project Manager for the Microtransit Study.
Good morning, Mariate. Michael Oglesby.
Good morning. I'm Michael Oglesby. I'm the General Manager of SunVan, SunTran, and Sunlink.
Great, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And Natalie Shep.
Good morning. I'm Natalie Shep. I'm the Climate and Community Engagement Manager at the Pima County Department of Environmental Quality.
Great, thanks for joining us today. And Sam.
Good morning, everyone. Sam Credio, Director of Transportation and Mobility with the City of Tucson.
Great, good morning, Sam. And we have Scott.
Hi, everyone. Scott Robidoux, Manager of Planning with the Tucson Airport Authority.
Great, good morning, Scott. And Unimi.
Good morning, Yunmi Zhang, Transportation Data Science Coordinator here at PAC.
Thanks for joining us, Unimi. And we do have our support staff here to join us as well, Brianne, Jeff, and Sonia and Jesse, so they'll be helping run the back end of our virtual meeting here. Was there anybody that joined on late and didn't get introduced? All right, hearing none. Jose, I think you can.
All right, thank you, Jeanette, for the assistance on the introductions. Okay, welcome everybody. Let's move on to item number 2, in-kind reporting. Jeanette.
Great, thank you, Jose. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, Jeanette. And let's see, moving on to item number 3, approval of the May 21st, 2025 meeting summary. Did everybody get a chance to take a look at the minutes? Can I get a motion?
I'll move that we approve the meeting summary from the May 21st meeting.
Okay, we got a motion. Can I get a second?
Second, this is Jeremy.
Jeremy, seconded. Okay, any further discussions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, the 2055 Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, also known as RMAP. Jeanette.
Thank you, Jose. And I just want to start out thanking everybody for coming together here a week prior to our normal meeting date. The reason being because we would like to open the 30-day public comment period for the RMAP. We did send out the link to the full document last week. I hope you've all seen it and had an opportunity to look at the plan or have your teams look at the plan. we hope to receive feedback from you all as well as from the general public over the next 30 days. Our plan is to open that public comment period, work with the paper and get that started this Friday. And that would close 30 days later, which would be July 13th, which would be prior to your meeting next month. We could fold in the public comment, bring that back for a presentation to you all. And then, of course, we're aiming for a regional council approval of the long range plan at the end of July. So we're still on track as we've been presenting for the past several months. So at this time, I don't have anything specific to share with you that you haven't seen or heard before. But if we could get a motion to open the 30-day public comment period, staff would greatly appreciate that. But if you have any questions or want to discuss the time frame a little bit, feel free to ask.
Thank you,
Jeanette. This is Sam. I'll make that motion so we can open up a discussion about it. So I move that we approve the plan to move to public comment.
Thank you, Sam. So there's a motion on the floor, and is there a second?
Second.
And we have a second by
Fausto.
Fausto. Thank you, Fausto. Okay, any further discussions?
I have some questions.
Sam,
Jose.
you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So once we open up the public comment, how will the comments be addressed? Is it going to be, I mean, I expect you'll present back to us, Jeanette, kind of what the public comments were.
Mm-hmm.
Do you expect that there would be changes to the draft document before it goes to regional council?
That's a great question, Mr. Chair, Mr. Credio, thanks for asking. We'll do a comment tracker like we've done in the past. So we'll have a spreadsheet with the comments that come in and with our responses. And that would be for comments that we receive from the public, but also from members of TPC, or if your staff on the RMAP working group provide comments as well. So we'll keep track of that. We've actually received some comments we did get one from ADQ that pertains to the conformity. So those will all be documented in that tracker. And that'll be provided to you in the packet for next month, but also be presented to the regional council when the complete document is presented. It'll be part of that package.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further discussions, questions, comments?
Like Natalie has a question.
Natalie,
Yeah,
you're
I'm curious where we do stand with the conformity part of this at this moment.
Pardon me, I didn't catch that, Natalie. Can you repeat?
I'm just curious where we do stand with the conformity part of this and how that's going to work out.
Sure. Yeah. So we did our outreach and put the conformity analysis out there. We did receive one comment from our stakeholder at ADQ. There was changes made, and Dustin I don't think he's on the call right now, but he can reach out to you directly and kind of walk you through that if you have a specific question. But some adjustments were made, and he's going to be sending those changes back to that stakeholder group just so that they're aware and they can also respond during that 30-day this next 30-day public comment period. So the draft right now has our the adjustments that were made based on that comment, and they so they'll be notified of the change that was made, and then they'll be able to provide another comment. But we don't anticipate any further changes based on the conformity. We will also be part of that interagency consultation group is FHWA and EPA. So they'll be notified that the draft is ready and we're just waiting approval from the regional council as well. So hopefully we can get a quick response turnaround from them and get our air quality conformity determination as quickly as possible. So yeah, we've made those corrections and got those sort of like expert comments in and incorporated into the document. So we're pretty confident in the text as it is right now.
So you still will need a final approval from EPA before this moves forward?
Well, the conformity determination comes from FHWA. It's typically after it's approved by regional council. So that's,
okay.
You know, how it usually happens. in the past. So we're trying to get that information to them ahead of time so that we can get that determination as quickly as possible. In the last RMAP, we approved the document in September and we didn't hear back from FHWA until January. Given that there's some time sensitive action that needs to happen, we want to make sure that we can get that determination finding as quickly as possible. So we're kind of getting the information to them ahead of time. And then once we get regional council's approval, we'll notify them again. It's approved as presented, and then hopefully we can get a response quicker.
Okay. So I've been hearing that it's been difficult maybe reaching people at FHWA. Is there some sort of contingency plan if they're non-responsive?
Well, fortunately, we've had some we've gotten some responses from EPA, which has been good. So one of the folks that we've been working with over at EPA has been responsive and working with Dustin to, kind of look over the information, and they're confident that it's looking good. FHWA, yeah, I mean, we do have a point of contact over there, and that's why we've been reaching out now to make sure that those that we can do what we can to kind of make sure the connection is there and the response can be as quick as possible. I'm optimistic that we can get a response quickly. I can't guarantee anything, obviously, but yeah, our approach has just been to continue to try to communicate and get the information to them as early as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. Let's see who I think I saw. Catherine, do you have your hand up?
I did have my hand up. I think I answered my question while I was looking on this side. One of the things, we haven't had much of an opportunity to review the full document, so I was just trying to verify that all of our county projects made it into the new document.
Yeah.
There's one strange naming convention. Instead of it just being Valencia Road, Mission to Camino de Oeste, it says revised in the front. I'm not sure why revised remained in there. It's been that for some time. So I might just make that comment right now because it's really kind of challenging to navigate the project list if they're not in alphabetical order.
Sure.
Can you walk through the timeline then? I mean, I get we need to go to public comment if we're going to meet our timeline of July, but what does it look like with the various management committee, regional council, and when they need to approve it? And are those meetings calendared for them so that can happen?
Yes. So getting this started today with your committee, with TPC, open the public comment period, and then next month, management committee, regional council should also have their regularly scheduled meetings. Regional council is scheduled for the last Thursday of July, which I think is the 31st. We have no indication that meeting won't happen or won't be scheduled for that day. So we are just continuing to target getting it in front of them. Management committee typically meets the first Wednesday. So when those meetings are scheduled, this is one of the priority agenda items for both of those meetings. So it should go through all three committees next month and get that approval. We did one of the reasons why we decided to hold this meeting today versus next week is to give ourselves a little bit extra time between getting the public comments and receiving the comments from your agencies and being able to document that and update to provide a near perfect draft, hopefully, to regional council at the end of July. So we wanted to, get this ball rolling as soon as possible. That way we can fold those comments in. But we have no reason to believe that those meetings are not going to happen at their regularly scheduled dates. But of course, we kind of go with the flow on that and just make sure we get it on those agendas.
Is there anything else, Catherine, or?
Nope, that's it. Thank you, Jeanette.
Okay, thank you. I think I got two more. Well, Sam, get your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I've asked the question before. Maybe I'll ask it a little bit differently. I know that RTA Next is one of the major funding sources in this plan. And I realize this is a long-range plan, so a lot can happen. The language in the plan specifically cites, a potential spring election. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. I know there's a lot of balls in the air right now. What does it look like if that doesn't happen? Is it at the next 5-year update? Is that when the reasonable funding sources might be updated, or does there have to be some sort of whole scale update to the plan if for some reason that doesn't come to fruition? And
That's a really great question, Mr. Chair, Mr. KDL. My understanding is that, we're going to make our best assumptions going into the plan that we approve next month. So we did our revenue projections, we did our project list, our timing for those projects, and we base that all on the information we know at this point in time, right? It's a snapshot in time. All of our funding sources are subject to change. How much we receive in HERF, how much federal grants we bring in. Any of those things are variables that could change over the course of the next 4 years. Obviously, RTA next in the election is one that is more in control of our region. That's, the voters here are going to be the ones that determine whether or not that funding source is available. And we'll have to fold that in into our long range plan and our TIP, as that information and those decisions are made. I'm not convinced that we're going to have to do a whole reworking of the RMAP just because one funding source, that variable changed. We're going to receive a new authorization bill next year at the federal level. And so variables are going to continue to change. Obviously, how we move forward with programming and how money is shown in the TIP, that's gonna, that would change. But for the purposes of long range planning, we're here, we're going to do the snapshot in time where we're at right now with the assumptions we have, and then we'll go with it. If we get direction from FHWA that we need to do something different, then so be it. We'll move forward with that process. But interestingly enough, you probably remember, I know most of you probably remember 5 years ago when we were having this conversation about the 2045 update. We were having the same conversation where what happens if RTA next doesn't happen, and so it's a wild card variable that a decision will be made in the next year, and we'll have to just take the outcome of that and do what we need to do.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeanette.
Jeanette, you don't think we will need like an RMAP amendment if obviously if the RTA next doesn't pass, because that's quite a bit of money and the plan needs to be financially constrained.
It is. And Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. It is. It's a big variable, right? It's a big portion of our funding profile. It's a big assumption in our financial plan and our fiscal constraint. But many variables change between now and the end of the 4-year cycle of the projects or of the long range plan. So it's a question that we'll have to pose to FHWA and get some clarity, but we'll have to
we'll wait till next year. Let's see what happens.
Exactly. And Jamie might have
I was gonna say
something more to add to that conversation as well.
Jamie's got your hand up. Jamie.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I wasn't actually going to comment on that, but just my 2 cents. I mean, I guess there's a question about spring and what's going to go, right? But we don't know what would happen if spring isn't the target date, but what if it's just delayed to November, hypothetically, right? So that's why, the update to the RMAP, it happens every 4 years. It follows a 3C process per the U.S. Code of being continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive. So there'll be more opportunities to revisit this, but we don't know what the future holds in terms of RTA next. So anyway, but I wasn't actually going to comment on that. I heard mention of the management committee dates, and I pulled up a schedule. Just want to let you know, I see that Wednesday, July 9th is the next management committee meeting. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks for looking into that, Jamie.
Anybody else? Any further questions? Let's see. Sam, you still have your hand up?
Nope, there we go.
There he goes. Thanks. Anybody else? I don't see any hands up. Okay, we have a motion on the floor in a second. So if we're ready, let's, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Moving on to item number 5. Update on the Delray microtransit service area analysis. All right, Mariette. Marietta.
Hello again.
Hello.
Janet, should I share my screen or how do we do this?
Zonia, did you have her presentation queued up or would you like her to just share her screen?
It should be right there.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there it
She
is.
should have control of the slides as well.
Perfect.
Oh, perfect. Oh yeah, I see it now. I know that it comes as a little clicker. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Mariate Echeverri. I'm a transit planner with Kimley Horn and have been the project manager for this study. And with me is Brian Cow, and we are going to, who is also a planner and has been working alongside with me on this project since inception. So we are going to give we have already presented to you a couple of times, and we're going to kind of show you where we are landing on everything. And yeah, so you have kind of the most updated idea of what is going on. So in the agenda today, we are going to talk about the results of the second round of public involvement. Last time when we presented before you, we were in Tucson doing public involvement. It was very successful, and I have a summary of that. We did, based on that public involvement, we did some adjustments to the service opportunity areas and the simulation. So we're gonna show you that, and then talk about how we are proposing this to be phased, and kind of the final elements in the report that include the air quality analysis, and then there is time for discussion. So on the public involvement, the phase 2 went from March 18 to 21st, kind of the in-person piece. We also had a survey that closed at the end of May. It was open for all this time just to be able to capture as many responses as we could. And we did different events at the time. We have the technical meetings with the PAC technical committee that was set up for this project, and we presented to you. We had a pop-up event at the Green Valley Library, and we had our teams at the transit centers just to be able to talk to people and show them what we're planning on doing. And we had several focus groups with the WPCCC. We actually met with them a couple of times because they had shown great interest in the project. We talked to Pima County staff, with the Ville Chamber and school districts, with several social agencies. We talked to a group of community members from Oro Valley and Picture Rocks as well. And the things that we heard were on kind of the technical meetings. We heard that it was very important to keep and for some reason my slide changed. The layout just changed. Don't know why. On the technical meetings, we heard that the connectivity to the fixed route is important, and we also discussed changes to the proposed zones, and based on places that were not included originally, that were recommended to be included, and important destinations and so on. On the community focus groups, many of the comments on the community focus groups also had to do with extending the boundaries of the opportunity zones. That was true for Vail, and also for Ajo. We included Y as part of the Ajo service zone. And on Oro Valley, we heard that the community really is very proud of the service they receive, and they really, I mean, they will welcome service as microtransit. However, they are very happy with the service they have. In Picture Rocks, there is a great interest in having transit service. This is a community that relies a lot on, I mean, if people don't have access to a car, they rely on social service agencies to help them moving around, and transit is something that they really welcome. And this actually was something that we took into consideration as we did the phasing, because originally we had put Picture Rocks at the kind of in the long term, and but as part of these discussions, we made also changes not only to the boundaries but also to the phasing when we are proposing these services to be implemented. And on the pop-up events, and really in general, also with the surveys, we have heard that the community is very supportive of the idea of microtransit receiving same day service, which is kind of one of the main changes that will come if microtransit is implemented, and having access to a very user-friendly app that allows them to book their services, and to also determine where their service is, and their car is, etc., is something also important. And it was also stressed again in all these meetings that weekend Sunday service is really needed. So that's something that we also have considered. And then we did the simulation again of the service opportunity zones, and Brian is going to talk about this. And Brian, I don't know if you have access to the slides, or you want
Yeah,
me
I
to?
don't have control, so you
Okay.
might have to advance the slide.
I can do it, yes.
And I'm here to just kind of each of our opportunity zones. And some of this will be a recap from last time, but some of these is going to be new information. I'm going to point that out. But just starting off, just as an overview of how we approach simulations on microtransit, there's just a lot of variables that we consider, which is on the screen right now. And they all kind of work together. One affects the other. And so our process that we've deployed on other places across the states do take into account all of these different variables. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this slide just introduces all the different zones that we are looking at for where microtransit could be feasible, and just we're looking into these zones to kind of assess the feasibility. You'll see that there are 13 zones on this map, and they are categorized into 2 tiers. So there's our weekday service zones, which are more rural zones with less residents, jobs, and trip activity. And so we have less expected transit ridership. And then we have our extended service zones, which are our more urban zones with more residents and jobs, higher transit propensity, higher trip activity, and just in general, higher expected ridership. The reason why we make this distinction at this early in this stage is because it's an input into our simulation. It does affect kind of the assumptions we're making about the service. And so we are putting our higher quality, longer span service in some of our more densely populated areas, and conversely, the maybe longer wait times in some of our less densely populated areas. But this map is an overview, and we're going to talk about each zone individually later in the presentation. So talking about some of those parameters that I'm talking about, some of those assumptions we're making about the zones. First of all, about our travel rules, it is anywhere to anywhere plus points of interest. This is basically saying that we are not putting any restrictions on where people could take microtransit to. You will be able to go anywhere you want as long as you're inside a zone, and then plus some points of interest and transfer points that are outside of the zone, because we recognize that there are some destinations that are just outside of our service boundaries, but are still important for the community to be able to reach. In terms of our booking model, this is where our two categories differ. Our weekday service zones, we have a target wait time of about 20 to 25 minutes, not to exceed 60 minutes. And our extended zones have a target wait time of 10 to 15 minutes with a maximum of 30. So just bringing that higher quality of service to our more densely populated areas. In terms of our bus stop model, we are assuming curb to curb for all of our trips. That means that the vehicle will pick you up and drop you off closest to your starting and final destinations. We're not asking our passengers to walk for a significant distance. Our fleet, we are assuming minivans with a capacity of 5 ambulatory passengers. Some of these are wheelchair accessible, which will have 2 ambulatory passengers and a wheelchair space. And then our service hours, this is also where our two categories differ. Our weekday zones will only have service on weekdays, while our extended zones are assumed to have Saturday and Sunday service as well. And then that service span in the day is slightly longer. So first step in our process after we've made all of those assumptions is to estimate demand. And I think this is something we've shown before, but just to recap, we typically do a low, medium, and high ridership estimate per weekday, just because we recognize that there is more uncertainty in terms of like ridership, and we want to just provide that range. We do believe that our best estimate is somewhere close to that medium value that you're seeing in the middle. But this does assume that there are no fares to ride the service. And we know that if we choose to introduce fares, then that ridership might move a little closer to that low estimate. Yeah, there's a weekday average value here and an annual estimate as well. Next slide. So this is the results of our simulation after we've deployed kind of our model, where we're basically simulating that ride matching and that daily operations to figure out, okay, with the demand that we have, how many vehicles do we need to serve all that demand, and kind of what are some of those performance indicators that result from that. And so as you can see, that annual ridership column is just from that last slide. The fleet size is the result of our analysis. We need this many vehicles per weekday running around, picking up all these passengers so that we're not leaving anybody behind. Productivity is our measure of boardings per revenue hour, which is basically the higher the better for this one. That means you're carrying more passengers per vehicle hour. Your average wait time, this is just to verify that we are kind of meeting our target. We want lower the better, but we do, because we defined that assumption early, we just want to make sure that our wait times are kind of near that value. Our average trip duration is more of a function of how our zone is designed and how far people are able to travel, but we generally want to keep that low as well, just to free up that capacity to carry other riders. And then our operating cost per trip, this is our cost efficiency measure. The lower the better. And just to see like just how costly it is to provide this service. And so on this slide, the green numbers are kind of highlighting our highest performing zones, and our red numbers are showing kind of the lowest performing zones. And this is just to compare between the zones and understand just kind of where they rank, and will inform our recommendations in terms of phasing, which we'll discuss later on. But from now on, I think we'll walk through each of the zones individually and just kind of discuss kind of how they were created and some of the revisions that we've made to it based on public feedback. So starting off with the Marana Ever Valley Zone, this is an existing Sun Shuttle General Public Dollar Ride Zone. And so we're keeping the boundary the same, but we're adding some of those points of interest outside. You can see the Tucson outlets and Arizona Pavilion Shopping Center kind of to the southeast there. And then showing those performance measures that we got from the simulation here. But Marana is one of our kind of our lower performing zones just because there's less density and less trip activity. And so it's resulting in kind of a higher estimated cost per ride at about $50 per passenger and a lower productivity at about 1.4 to 2.0 boardings per revenue hour. Talking about our Picture Rock zone. So this zone covers the community of Picture Rocks, as well as the outside destinations of the Tucson outlets and the Arizona Pavilion Shopping Center. As a weekday service zone, this one's also one of our lower performing zones. We're seeing pretty low productivity and pretty high cost per ride. But as we heard from public feedback, they are pretty interested in microtransit. And so that is something to consider as we think about phasing. Next zone is our Tortolita Continental Ranch zone. So this is one zone that we've changed based on public input. But this zone covers, we've extended this zone to cover the Continental Ranch area to the west of the I-10. This one also has quite a few of those points of interest, zones that are outside, like our Northwest Medical Center and our Tucson Mall Tohono Transit Center. This zone is one of our higher performing zones. So we are getting pretty low cost per ride at about $28 and pretty high productivity at 2.7 to 3.3. Next slide. So our Oro Valley zone is an existing dollar ride zone. And so we left the boundaries unchanged here, but we've added the Northwest Medical Center and the Tucson Mall Tohono Transit Center as external destinations. And this is also one of our higher performing zones at about $32 per ride and 2.2 to 2.8 boardings per revenue hour. Next slide. Our Casa Adobe zone, this is one of our smaller zones, but it has a lot of pretty high density of trips and trip activity. And so this is one of our higher performing zones at $30 per ride and 2.4 to 3.0 boardings per revenue hour. Our Catalina Foothills zone, this one is pretty large for a microtransit zone, and it has lower density, but just because of the size, it's covering a lot of ridership. And so we are getting, our simulation resulted in $26 per ride and 2.8 to 3.4 boardings per revenue hour. Our Tanque Verde zone, this one is kind of medium to low in terms of performance, just because it's lower density. We are getting a estimated cost per ride at $41 and our productivity at 1.9 to 2.5 boardings per revenue hour. Our Rita Ranch Savano Littletown zone. So this one is one that we have modified based on public input. Originally, we just covered that Rita Ranch and Savano area, but we've heard that it is important for this community to, that the Littletown community kind of adjacent to the west also doesn't have much transit service, but they would be interested, and it's important for them to have that accessibility. And so we've expanded the zone to cover that Littletown area. And we've also just made sure to include more points of interest here. So we have the high school and the Safeway in Vail to the southeast, as well as the county fairgrounds. So this zone has grown a lot after our public input. So we are estimating a lot higher ridership, but cost per ride and our productivity stayed kind of the same as from before at $23 per ride and 3.1 to 3.7 boardings per revenue hour. So one of our higher performing zones. Our Vail zone here is unchanged from before. So basically just covering the census designated place of Vail. It is kind of like medium, low performing. It comes up as $34 per ride and 2.1 to 2.7 boardings per revenue hour. When we talked to the community in Vail, they indicated that there are more communities outside of our zone that would like transit kind of to the north in Rincon Valley and to the southwest in Corona de Tucson. And we did study what would happen if we included those locations in our service boundary. However, those trips resulted in trip distances that were kind of too long. And what that happens is that just brings down performance. And we're seeing like a big drop in performance if we expanded the boundary to cover those communities. And so our recommendation is to just keep this zone more compact. And if it's a very successful service after implementation, we can consider making those expansions. Talking about our Tucson Estates, Drexel Heights, and Valencia West zone. So this is one of our, I think this is our highest ridership zone. That can be attributed because this is like one of our largest zones, but it is pretty densely populated and we're seeing high transit propensity here. And so our cost per ride is about $30, sorry. And our productivity is at 2 to 2.6 boardings per revenue hour. Our West Tucson zone, this one's a little special. This one is actually an expansion of existing microtransit service. This one covers the Sun On Demand Zone 1, just expanding it westward to cover more of those residential communities that are adjacent to the zone. And what we found that microtransit is likely, our simulation estimated that cost per ride would be $27. And the productivity will be 2.7 to 3.3 boardings per revenue hour. So one of our better performing zones. Our Sahuarita Green Valley zone, the zone boundary is unchanged from the Sun Shuttle Dollar Ride service that is out there right now. And this is one of our better performing zones. It is getting a $23 cost per ride and about 3.1 to 3.7 boardings per revenue hour. And last but not least, our Ajo and our Y zone. So based on public input, they would like to see the service is actually performing really well, and they would like to see it expanded to Y and the casino next to Y. And so we've made that modification to our zone and redid our estimates. And what we found is that cost per ride is about $39. And productivity is about 1.8 to 2.4 boarding per revenue hour. So that is all the zones. And I know I walked through that pretty quickly, but we'll have some time for discussion at the end. But right now I'm going to hand it back to Mariette.
Thank you, Brian. So part of the analysis we are doing is also to look at the Title VI and equity analysis. So we went through the entire proposition and found, and well, let me step back a little bit. So Title VI is always required when the agency is doing service changes that are higher than 25% of the service. And then there is the disparate impact and disproportionate impact that are calculated at 20%. So we did all these calculations to determine if the service changes that we are proposing are affecting the communities, and we found that we don't meet the threshold in any instance. There are some impacts, of course, to some of the communities because we are eliminating some fixed routes from Sun Shuttle, but we are replacing them with microtransit. So this kind of there is impact, but at the end, the community is going to have more service because they are going to have more of a curb-to-curb service instead of the fixed route that they have to go to, and that is very limited, and they have to walk to. And not everybody in the zone has the option to use the fixed route. because it could be very far away. So at the end, we are mitigating any impacts that happen with the introduction of microtransit because of the amount of service that it provides. We are also performing a air quality analysis. Based on the simulations and analysis that we have done on travel demand, we have been able to determine the vehicle miles traveled. So we took that and we are doing analysis on the level of pollutants as a result of the miles traveled added and avoided. And then the result of all of that is going to be kind of a dollar amount that you'll see in the report. And we are very close to finish with that piece of the analysis. And then we have been looking at what it takes to implement microtransit. So we have, with all the simulations, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk here about the phasing. So Brian talked about all the zones and the extended service and the kind of normal service on weekdays. And here we are looking at what could be implemented first. So in the near term, and we are considering the near term from 1 to 4 years, we are proposing the Tortolita, Casadobes, Rita Ranch, Sahuarita, and Apple be part of that. Then we have the medium term that goes from about 5 years to 9, and then we have there Oro Valley, Tucson Estates, Valencia West, Drexel Heights, West Tucson, Vail, and Picture Rocks. And then in the long term, we are placing Tanque Verde, Catalina, and Marana. And the reason why we did this phasing was looking at the riderships, looking at the productivity, we took into consideration also the public engagement and how the communities feel about these services. So we took all this data and all this input, and that's how we came up with the phasing. And then we did a calculation based on the simulations. Brian showed you kind of the operating cost. So we made a calculation of what it would take to implement all these microtransit service in the county, taking into consideration these discontinued services and the costs that come out of it. I see someone with the hand raised. Scott, yes.
Yes, would it be possible to potentially expand one of the transit districts further west to Ryan Airfield? It's at the intersection of Ajo Highway and Valencia Road. We have some existing flight schools at Ryan Airfield, and we have some other larger ones that might be coming in the future. We're still working out the details, but it won't be for at least a year or two. I'm just thinking there may be some demand from the students and wanting to get into Tucson and maybe have a different means. I'm not sure what method we could do to do that expansion, if that is even at all possible. But just something that may be of interest. We may have some students that would need to be able to access Ryan Airfield possibly if they're not driving personal autos into the airport.
Where is that exactly?
That's at the intersection. Ryan Airfield's at the intersection of Ajo Highway SR 86 and at the far western end of Valencia Road.
Is that something that we have in our plan, Brian?
Yeah, it is close to our Drexel Heights, Valencia West, Tucson Estates zone, but it is not currently included within our service boundary.
Yeah, and Janet, I think that I'll ask for your input here too, but we are right now finalizing the kind of the report. We already did all the simulations and did all the kind of modifications based on, input that we receive through the process. And we certainly can note what you are mentioning as a possibility to look as a further, expansion once these things are implemented. And also there are some things here that are going to happen. Valencia West is in the medium term, so there are going to be opportunities when the PAC takes this into implementation to look at it again and refine those boundaries that we set today.
Okay.
But Janet, I don't know if you have any other ideas there.
Yeah, no, Mariachi hit the nail on the head. So yeah, it's right now we've wrapped up the simulations and set the areas, but if the regional council RTA board decide to move forward with implementing a microtransit service area, at that point we would get into the details and take a look at exactly where those services would be provided and into the logistics side of it.
I think, Jeanette, we probably would be interested in wanting to talk further. It sounds like right now it's okay if it doesn't extend out to Ryan Airfield because the flight school that's interested, we're still working out the details. I don't see them going forth and building in the next year or so. So it's going to be a bit of time, but appreciate if we could maybe have like a offline discussion, maybe one that's a little bit more appropriate, where we could talk about further about where, if it is something we still want to do, where it might be appropriate where to have the service stop at Ryan Airfield. But
yeah, certainly. And
yeah,
if any of these zones come to fruition, we would be looking to our jurisdiction partners that are in those areas, major employers, neighborhood associations, and some of those stakeholder groups that we've already talked to make sure that it goes from the things that we've decided during this study into the current situation that's going on in that community at that time. Because as Mariate said, like there's some that are kind of recommended for if we pull the trigger and go forward with a microtransit project or program, there's some that are more ripe to be implemented right away, and then there's others that they could work, but there's reasons that they would be more of a long-term idea should funding be available for those. So yeah, but definitely we're happy to chat with you.
Okay, thank you.
I think normally wait till the end of the presentation, but Sam, you got your hand up? You got something? You got a question?
I'll wait till the end, Jose.
Great, right. Thanks, Sam. Okay, Marietta, continue. Thank you.
Yes, I'm almost there. We are also looking at the capital costs, and here we are just really, the operational costs include everything that is related to personnel and maintenance, et cetera, and here we are just looking at the vehicles. For this, we are looking at vans. That's how typically microtransit is served, and so this is something that the PAC group is going to have in their hands when they begin looking at implementation. And then just some considerations as as you'll begin looking at how to make this a reality. We are we are talking about service models. So there are different ways of providing microtransit. One is a turnkey service. There is that the agencies provides the service themselves. And just purchase the software. There are hybrid opportunities. So it's kind of a puzzle that you can do any piece of it. For this implementation, because the RTA already has a turnkey operator, we think that probably that would be the best model for this, because the operator could take on providing the microtransit service. And I know that the RTA has been working with the current operator to improve the apps that are available. And if they decided to do it turnkey, there's going to be the need for an app that is really kind of addressing the microtransit needs. On technology, well, the app itself is kind of the most important thing that needs to be available because microtransit depends heavily on how the trips are staggered for success. So it has to be a really proven software. And we talk in the report about what those softwares that are in the market are available for the PAC to consider. On the topic of fares, right now, fares are free. And if the RTA decides or the entire county decides to charge fares, our recommendation is to have an integrated fare, so it's not a burden on the person that is riding microtransit to pay for fares, every time they board a different bus. And really, if you want to attract people, you need to make it accessible. So having kind of an integrated fare will make more sense. Another important aspect for microtransit is to have, if the PAC decides to pursue implementation, is to have a really robust marketing campaign. We have seen across the country that the systems that have been more successful are those that have a really robust marketing and PR effort, because this changes the way how people access transit. So eliminating through a lot of information and educational campaigns, eliminating kind of the fear to try it and explaining how it works is going to be super important. It's going to be important to have agency coordination. There is integration with fixed route, and not only with the Sun Shuttle, but also with the Sun Tran, and some other agencies will need to be part of the conversation as well as the PAC considers implementing it. On the funding side, we know that the referendum is coming next. So there should be a mix of the funding that comes from the referendum plus what the PAC receives from the federal and state revenues. And I know that there is this conversation about what happens if there is if the referendum doesn't pass. And I think at that time the PAC will need to determine the priorities. What is going to be most important for the county to move forward, and microtransit may be one of those things. And finally, on these considerations, it is recommended to implement microtransit first with a pilot project, just to see how it operates, how it is received, and to be able to refine the assumptions that have been made. And for this pilot project, we think that Ajo Y will be a perfect place because it is contained, it has very good usage, and people really appreciate and support transit. So this is kind of where we are heading with our recommendation for the pilot. And then our next steps, we are finalizing the draft and final reports and delivering to the PAC. And now it's time for questions. Someone else?
Thank you, Marietta. Okay, Sam, I think you're the first one.
Great, thanks so much, Jose, and thank you for the presentation. I'm trying to understand. I think maybe I want to zoom out a little bit and understand kind of the goals and objectives of this study, because I know that this was kicked off, utilizing some of those carbon reduction funds that were available to the region, and we saw value in that. I think as we're getting closer to the potential end of the RTA, I'm trying to understand like how this all fits together. Is the recommendations that are being made in this for the RTA funded and operated Sun Shuttle service?
I can go ahead and answer that,
like
Jose. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Chair, Mr. Crediel. It really is an option on the table for whatever funding we want to chase to implement it. So yes, it could be an option on the table for future RTA Next funding when we're looking at what is the best way to provide transit service to different portions of the region. In the meantime, though, as Mariate said, they're recommending a pilot project, which, would probably come from a different funding source other than RTA. But really what we've asked Kimley to do in this project is to show us what it would cost and what it would take and what the outcomes could be should one of these service areas come to fruition, or should all of them. What would that cost be? And then look at what would the outcomes be in terms of carbon reduction, how could this impact VMT and our air quality? And so that's what we're hoping to get, is really just a menu of, if we did a project like this, if we implemented these different timeframes, this is what the outcomes could be. And then, the decision would have to be made by regional council, RTA board on, do we want to pursue a microtransit option? To what extent? Do we want to do one or two? Or do we want to find funding to do all of these? And then, pull the trigger and go for it and see what happens. The idea of doing a pilot is really appealing because we don't really have a true microtransit set up right now. We have dial ride and we have some things that are kind of hybrids. But to really deploy a full scale, essentially transit Uber, if you will, curb to curb service, could that be successful, and would that be a really good option for some of these areas? I think the study has shown that, yeah, it could be a really, really good solution for certain parts of the region, Ajo and Y being, kind of the low-hanging fruit, if you will. But from there, it could be used. It's just information that could be used to make those decisions in the future. So as Mariate and Brian mentioned, they're doing the environmental side, taking a look at what the impacts could be based off the usage of that carbon reduction funding. Part of the reason why we want to look at microtransit as an option is because it does change how people get around, and there's impacts, positive and negative impacts of how we move folks around, and that was definitely one of the deliverables that we anticipate from this study.
And I just have a couple other follow-up questions.
Sure.
So I heard in the presentation other funding sources. I didn't realize, are there other funding sources that RTA is utilizing to run shuttle, or I thought it was all RTA funded?
There's FTA money.
Is there some for like rural? Is for operations or for I guess for operations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's no other PAG money though. There's no state transit money, right? It's either
Not
RTA
to my knowledge.
or
Not to my knowledge, and Preston's not here to answer that question. But Mariate, do you know? I don't think so. I think it's all RTA and FTA.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So I guess I'm just curious, like what other funding sources would fund these microtransit options outside of those two?
So the federal government offers kind of many different pots of money. You can have under the FTA, you could have the 5307, and you can have, which is the urban, and you can have the 5311, which is the rural. But there are also some special projects that have been available in the past, and we will need to see what is available this time around with this administration. That there have been some funding, has been some funding available, for instance, for pilot projects. And then there is also discretionary money to get capital, so purchasing the vehicle. So they are, at the end, the funding sources and being a little bit of a puzzle. And I mean, in your case, you have been very fortunate to have the sales tax funding that has been funding transit for all these years, and hopefully you will be able to do that as you know in years to come. Because when you depend only on those federal sources of revenue, you get very limited, and that's what I was mentioning. That if something changes, I think the PAC and RTA, they're gonna need to look at what the priority is. What is most important and what type of service in general entirely is most important to fund, and not only talking about the microtransit piece.
Okay, last question, I promise. So when, assuming that, trying to understand that the PAG Regional Council will get an update on this because this is a PAG study, but the RTA board has to make a decision if they want to implement a pilot on Sun Shuttle. Do you expect that a pilot is the recommendation going to be to initiate a pilot during the next 12 months, which could potentially be the last year of Sun Shuttle?
Sure, I can answer that, Mr. Chair, Mr. Credio. So actually yes, it would, this is a PAG project. So it would be the PAG board that takes a look at it. It wouldn't necessarily go to the RTA board to fund a pilot because we could chase, 5307 or 5311 federal dollars to do that. So it would just be a matter of, what funding source we would want to use to fund a pilot. I know we've funded transit pilot projects in the past with federal dollars. So it would really just be that. I don't think we couldn't use current RTA $1 to run a pilot for this. But yeah,
Why
it would
couldn't
just
you?
it would depend on how we wanted to pursue it. Certainly, I know Preston and Mary's team on the transit side here have been very successful in chasing FTA grant money to do these things. So, and that partially this project is actually partially funded with CRP and with a federal FTA grant to do specific elements of this project. So, yeah, that would. Our recommendation, our staff recommendation is obviously going to be what our consultants share with us, and then those decisions would go to the RTA board. But I think in a real optimistic situation, there'll be a grant fund that we could go after to pursue a pilot project.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Sam, and still got Catherine.
Thanks, Jose. I'm kind of piggybacking on some of the questions Sam asked. And if you go, there was the one slide that showed some of those implementation costs, and there was a column that was discontinued services. Can you explain which of the services were included in that? Because a lot of these zones overlap both with Sun Shuttle, but with a Sun Tran route, with Dial-A-Ride. So I don't know what costs are included in that discontinued service.
Yeah, so some of this, so we are not touching the Suntran routes. What we are proposing to discontinue is a few routes on the Sun Shuttle. And Brian, remind me the numbers. I think it's 410, 413, and 417.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So the specific fixed route services are all Sun Shuttle. We have the Sun Shuttle 450 in the Rita Ranch area, Rita Ranch to Savano. We have the 413 going to Marana, and we have the 430 going to the Tucson Estates, Valencia West area.
Yeah, thank you. I got all the numbers wrong. Only 413 it was. Yeah, but also the places that have the general public Dial-A-Ride are those places are going to be. I mean, those zones are going to be replaced with microtransit, so you don't have duplicative service. And because you are really offering with microtransit more level of service, your Dial-A-Ride will not work anymore. So that's why it says discontinued service, because we are using kind of those funds that are applied to Dial-A-Ride to the microtransit, so you can get a reduction in the cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be helpful, and maybe it's in the full report where these numbers are kind of tied back to whatever route or service is being recommended for discontinuation. I think that would help kind of crosswalk where there's new operating costs, where there's savings. And I think it also ties back to some of what Sam was saying is some of those costs are covered by RTA. So I'm curious if, you know, could this be implemented with RTA, current RTA under, you know, one of their existing programs? There's neighborhood circulators, there's special needs, there's other categories in RTA that are going to be discontinued through this. So why couldn't those costs help pay for this pilot?
That's a good question, Catherine, and obviously one for the RTA board. I think given where we are at the end of RTA, and given that this is a completely different model for how we would run transit, I mean, we could propose it to the RTA board and say, hey, let's swap out what we're currently doing with something along these lines. That would be, I mean, it would be a major change. And there's also a major, you know, upgrade to how we deliver a microtransit service. And, you know, the timing is everything, right? And I don't know if there will be an appetite for a major service change at the end of you know, RTA 1. There might be, and it might also just come down to a strong desire for one of the zones to be upgraded or changed. You know, we worked closely with the folks that are running the Oro Valley transit, and you know, they're very concerned about the continuation of transit services up there. They have a really solid program, and they're not looking to you know, provide, like, to do any major changes right now at the end there. But there are elements of what we've been investigating, specifically like the apps and the way that we communicate with the riders and get the vehicles to them, that they might be able to implement, you know, right away. But you know, a full-scale change on how we deliver service here at the end, like while we're trying to go to a vote, might not be the most digestible option, but certainly it's one that the RTA board could look at if they really want to go that direction.
And the only last kind of comment is the county does pay, you know, a maintenance of effort annually. That was just renewed, the IGA last week, as was some of the services for Aho, I believe. And so, you know, that is part of the funding picture. And I think when we start digging into actual costs of providing transit and the transit we want, perhaps beyond RTA, you know, we want to be in that conversation because it's an expensive endeavor, and it's something that the entire county needs to get behind if there's going to be changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Any further questions, Catherine? Sam, you got another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on something I just heard right now to make sure I understand. So the recommendation in the report is to reduce service on the Sun Shuttle fixed route and shift it over to microtransit. And then what I think I heard Jeanette say is that would not utilize RTA funds to fund the pilot, but it would result in a reduction in fixed route service on Sun Shuttle. Did I correctly say that, or are we actually talking about shifting resources, RTA funded resources, from fixed route to microtransit?
I can go, Jeanette. So we are shifting. Yeah, we look at the fixed routes and the ones that had low productivity, very low ridership, and we are shifting those resources into the microtransit, which will be a better service and more quality of service too.
So then that would be RTA funded, correct?
The study isn't necessarily going to be that specific in how we fund it right out of the gate, because really the purpose of this is really just a study. Like, it's a feasibility study. It's not like a plan where we're saying we're going to do this, we should do this. It's really just an information to get to the RTA board as an option to decide on those things. Certainly there's ambulances right outside my office. So if you hear that, Sorry, it's distracting, but it's always interesting how those things pop in. But yeah, I mean, ideally, if there is federal grant money to chase, if there's money that we can do to run a pilot, that would be something we would pursue and bring to the regional council. But really, as they decide what's going to happen to transit, the impacts of, you know, our transit funding in the next year or two, this is an option on the table for them. You know, we've had the discussions before, and they're having those discussions now at RTA board. Is, you know, if RTA next doesn't pass, what happens to transit? Obviously, we all know there will be impacts to transit service. But how do we still provide service to the region? How do we provide service to vulnerable users? Those are questions that they're going to have to answer. And this is one option that they might want to pursue as a solution. So it's hard to say with that uncertainty still sitting there, but we want to make sure that, you know, the goal of this study is to have that served up so that if they want to pursue it, should one jurisdiction want to pursue it for one part of the county, or one jurisdiction, they could do that. But we want to make sure that we have the analysis there so we know what that option would cost and what it would take to implement it.
And I just want to be clear, the recommendation is to implement a pilot. That's going to be the recommendation that comes out of this study.
Yeah, and I think we're still working with the working group to come up with the final recommendation. We haven't gotten to that point where we're saying this is this is the final recommendation. We're kind of sorting through the last minute, not the last minute, but we're sorting through this analysis because it isn't complete yet. Like, we haven't completed the environmental side of it, and we haven't really gotten into the nitty-gritty with the working group. So we want to make sure we get to that point and then make a recommendation. So I can't commit to you right now what the recommendation is going to be, because we want to get through the working group and make sure we have all those variables.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that aside from which zone you decide to recommend, the recommendation is to implement a pilot project, so you can look at how that looks, you know, on the ground. And the RTA and whoever needs to be involved will assist the kind of identifying who is going to be, which area is going to be in that pilot pool.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. No further questions.
Thank you, Sam. Anybody else? I don't see any hands. Can I just, as a clarification on the funding, I thought the majority or the substantive portion of the funds for transit came from the RTA, and the 5307 or 5311, that was like buying buses and minivans. Is that right? Or how do you actually receive federal funds for operating transit?
I believe 5311 is used for some operations. Preston has joined us and he can provide a better answer than I.
But we're talking about funding this program, and I thought the RTA funded most of the services in transit, and we were using federal dollars for equipment, purchasing equipment, like buses and all that.
So I can provide a little bit of clarity, at least on the 5311 FTA grant funding side. There are funds set aside for operational costs, and also when you do apply for 5311 grant funding, through the application, there actually is a section where you can apply for funding specifically for pilot studies. And that's something that we would pursue if we were given direction to initiate a pilot for microtransit to some degree. We could definitely, in our next grant application for 5311 funds, request funding specifically for that pilot.
Thank you. Thank you, President. All right, guys, let's see. There's no other hands. I can't see any other hands. So this is an informational item. So if there's no other questions, thank you, Marietta, for the presentation. And let's move on to item number 6. Update on the regional transportation plan.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Appreciate you allowing us some time on your agenda. Jeanette, did you have anything you wanted to say to kick us off, or do you want me to hop right in?
Go right ahead, Chris. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. All right, perfect. I have the slides there. Cool. Looks like I have the buttons. So again, thank you for some time this morning. Just a quick agenda of what we'll go through. So I'll give you an update on where we've been in the last few months since we last gave an update to this committee. We'll talk through the preferred high priority network and the process that led to that, as well as the piece we're in right now, which is defining the actual active transportation improvement projects that go along with that high priority network. And that's all going to be presented to our technical working group and the public in our next round of engagement. So we'll talk through that, and then we'll wrap up with some next steps. So progress. You can see here we're in kind of the middle of our big three tasks here, which are that regional corridor identification and evaluation is identifying where we think beneficial projects could occur across the entire region and defining what those projects are. The active transportation toolbox, we're at the very tail end of that task. Just addressing a few final comments, but that is a very helpful tool that we've used to help define what our initial projects are in the list of the initial recommended projects. And we're also in the middle of our air quality benefits section, which we are actively working on right now and should be wrapped up in the next couple months. Quick look at the schedule. Here we are in June. We have both a technical working group meeting, as I mentioned, coming up next week. We are also kicking off our next round of public and stakeholder engagement. As we move through that process, we're going to be completing our corridor identification and evaluation, as well as air quality benefits, both of which will feed into our draft RATP document, which we'll be producing throughout July and August. Which we will get out in draft form to our technical working group, as well as conduct one final round of public and stakeholder engagement, which will coincide with the adoption process and trying to build momentum for implementing the high priority projects. So we'll go through the process, and this slide may look familiar to you. This has been our process since the beginning of this year for defining what the actual projects are that we're going to be recommending. And really steps 1 through 4 are really the demand side of the equation. So where do we think that adding active transportation facilities or having a high quality network would actually move the needle in terms of accommodating people that need to use active transportation and may not have access to a vehicle, where there's short trips being made by vehicles that we could potentially convert, that sort of thing. So steps 1 through 4 are really kind of defining where do we think a high priority network should be. And then step 5, which is what we're getting into right now, is what are the actual projects that we pair up with that network that are going to go forward as recommendations from this project. And we'll talk through in a lot more detail here, but wanted to show you and step you through the process again. So the first 2 steps were really defined in our technical working group meeting back in January. And this slide may look familiar. I believe this was presented last time around when we gave you an update. We came up with 3 scenarios that we wanted to look at. So if we put our finger on the scale for different things, how would that change the outcome of this network? So we looked at maximizing need-based connectivity. So focusing really heavily on people that are more likely to use active transportation facilities for trips other than recreation. Maximize accessibility is really how do we just connect the most people to this network? And the last one was maximize safety. So where do we have observed or perceived safety issues in the transportation network today? And what happens if we really focus on that? And essentially, we took these 8 different metric groups and weighted them differently according to each of these 3 scenarios. And then looked at our network, our total transportation network for the region, and saw which segments popped out based on the data. So next step after that was identifying our high priority network packages. So we applied those weights that we saw on the previous slide. And we really talked through this with our technical working group at our March meeting and presented the draft results to them and made subsequent revisions to the network. So you can see here the output for each of the three. This is maximizing safety. That's essentially, we took the top 10 results from each of our 8 geographic areas. So we split the region up into 8 geographic areas. And the lines that you see that have a kind of thick gray behind them, those were top 10 segments from each area. And then we went ahead and connected those and tried to form a cohesive network based on those top 10 segments. And so that's where you see the lines that color correspond with each of those geographic areas. So not expecting you to digest what's in here. This is really just for information, and we'll be providing the full information in the report, but just wanted to show you kind of how this process wrapped up. So maximizing safety is this one. The next one, maximizing accessibility. You can see there's a few changes in that network. And then finally, maximizing need-based connectivity. So you can see as you glance through those, a lot of the segments remain the same, but there are some differences within each of those networks, depending on how we kind of put our thumb on the scale with weighting the criteria that we came up with to evaluate these segments. And so our technical working group was key in refining these with us. We went through a intensive process with them to get comments, refine these networks, bring it back for more comments. And so we're feeling pretty good about how these 3 scenarios wrapped up. Next step here, and this is what we're at the tail end of right now, is selecting a single preferred high priority network. Again, we had a meeting with the technical working group. This one was in April, where we brought them the results of those 3 scenarios and talked through how we would define the preferred high priority network. So we'll hop into that. So this is the process we went through to define that high priority network from the 3 scenarios we looked at. So if a segment was in 2 or more of the scenario packages, we included that in our preferred network. We then, again, ran this by our technical working group. And so locations that they knew were key connections or important for a reason that we weren't capturing directly through our quantitative analysis, we had our technical working group members suggest additional links to be added in the preferred network. And then we zoomed back a little bit and looked at the overall connectivity of the regional network and added in a few more connection segments here and there just to make sure we're creating an integrated network. So all those together made our preferred network package, which you can see here. Again, they're colored by the color of the geographic area behind them. Ended up with more segments in this than we did in any of the scenario networks, and that was just because we were meshing a lot of things together. So ended up with a pretty robust high priority network here. And essentially this forms the baseline of where we're going to be recommending specific active transportation projects going forward. And that's the piece we're kind of getting started / in the middle of right now. So we'll walk through that next. So last step in this process here is, as I mentioned, developing the actual projects to go along with the high priority network. We're going to be going through our initial cut at these next week with our technical working group on Tuesday. And so we'll be getting materials out to them very shortly and opening up a 2-week-long review period for them to be able to review our initial projects and suggest changes. And so we are still in process on this one now. Again, kind of a multi-step process to convert from the preferred network to actual project recommendations. So for each preferred network segment, what we did is a review of existing facilities and compared that to our active transportation toolbox, which has established and really is pulling from a lot of national best practices from around the country. You know, what are context appropriate facilities for each roadway type? So when we looked at the evaluation network here, we first did a review of, are there context appropriate facilities already on that roadway or nearby? So if a road already has a shared use path, if it already has good pedestrian crossings, if it's a bike boulevard parallel to a major road, that's, another acceptable facility type. So that was our first screening of, okay, we already have context appropriate facilities for this segment, so we move on to the next segment. If there weren't context appropriate facilities, we then looked through a compiled list of programmed projects from around the region. So anything that is in a CIP for a city or the county, or a PEG funded project we know is coming up. We looked at those. And again, if there's a context appropriate facility already being planned and programmed, we added that as, okay, this improvement is already coming, so we don't need to worry about this segment. So if there is not an existing context appropriate facility, not an identified programmed project, we then looked at previous recommendations from other plans. So our process started with a robust review of other plans that have been done across the region by PAG and member agencies, and documented all of the recommended active transportation projects from those. And so we went to that list and then checked, okay, is there a project that's already been recommended that would address the travel need? So if that was there, then great, we can move on to the next segment. So if none of those things are happening, if there's not an existing facility, not an identified programmed project, not a previously recommended project, then our team went ahead and developed a new project, essentially to address the need for that segment of the high priority network. I guess I'll stop quickly. Any questions on the process so far, or how we went through any of those steps?
Okay, it's Catherine.
Thank you. I have I guess a quick question just on the geographic areas. How are those determined? Is it like the area? Is it the number of miles of roadway? Is it a population density? Is it a need based? It seems kind of arbitrary to me where these lines have been drawn.
Sure. And I'll definitely let Jeanette weigh in here if there's anything I missed. So we started with kind of grouping actual agency boundaries together, and then moved away from that once we realized that that may or may not really have an impact on where people are trying to travel with active transportation. And so went to a more generic kind of area of the region based on major barriers, based on rivers, highways, things like that. Population densities, there are a few locations in the region where there's a pretty clear dividing line between denser areas and less dense areas. And so those factored in. Jeanette, anything else you want to add on how we defined those 8 geographic areas?
No, not really. Chris kind of hit it in a nutshell. We also, I guess, just one little thing we looked at too is what is a realistic distance for someone to travel on the active transportation network. So thinking about, are we really going to get trips from, let's say, Oro Valley to, the east side of Tucson on the active transportation network. So we kind of split it up based on that. And I do believe we looked at employment centers too and activity centers, and where they were in proximity to population.
Yeah, and we did run the boundaries of those geographic areas past our technical working group as well, and refined a little bit from there.
And then I guess just to follow up on that, does each, and you might have covered this, I'm sorry, does each area have the same number of projects then? So West would have 10 projects and Urban Core would have 10 projects and East would have 10 projects? Or is it?
No.
like the total of everything that was identified in those areas is included, because the map seems sparse if it's everything. And
So
some of the roads seem a little bit more like we wanted to put something on there.
So there are not the same number of segments or projects in each of the geographic areas. I know when we started our map with the top 10 segments from each as kind of the core that we were trying to connect. The actual number of segments within each of the areas didn't end up being exactly the same, and the number of projects varies quite a bit by the geographic area based on how many segments there were, and then going through this list of where are there existing segments. We don't need to, redo something that's already there. And so as we especially got to the preferred network, we were focused a lot less on number of segments per geographic area and more on making sure we were connecting major activity centers and the geographic areas together to develop that preferred network. So we did start out with the top 10 segments, but that was just the very base of the network, and it grew from there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Catherine. And Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any comments. I just wanted to let y'all know that I have to leave, so I'm going to be logging off.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks, Sam.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right, Chris, I don't see all the hands, so if you want to
Thank
continue.
you. All right, we'll keep rolling. So coming up here, we are going into our second round of engagement that we're hoping to launch here in the next couple weeks. And so our goal here is to show the draft RITP project list on the preferred network and get feedback from the public on what they like, what they don't like. If there's something critical we've missed, we really want to get everybody's input. Similar to our first round, it's going to be hybrid, in-person and virtual. So we are updating our web mapping platform to display the projects and allow people to go in and give a thumbs up, thumbs down, or comment on the projects in there. We're going to couple that with a survey for people to be able to give us what their top projects were out of the list. And our in-person engagement, the materials will very much mirror what we're having online. So we'll have maps available for people to put Post-its on the map and say, we like this, or we don't like this, or there's a connection here that we would really like to see. We'll allow people to give us their top projects, which we'll record. So we really are designing those to work together so we can put all the results together very easily at the end of the process. We've identified a handful of in-person pop-up events that we're going to be doing around the region. We're focused on trying to spread those around the different parts of town, trying to get north, south, east, and west all in there within this time frame of kind of mid-June through mid to late July. And so we have a mix of pre-planned events that we can leverage and get a table or a booth set up and try to get people flyers or get them to interact there. Also with other pop-ups, so things like busy trailheads or popping up on the loop, something like that. We'll just try to grab people as they go past and at a minimum give them flyers for the virtual engagement, and if we can stop them for a little bit, try to get them to give input directly. So as we move into this round, which we'll be launching shortly, we'll definitely want to leverage our technical working group and our member agency staff to get the word out, in addition to PAG Zone platforms to advertise the public engagement. And lastly here, next steps. So June and July, as I mentioned, we'll be launching our public engagement. We're also going to be collecting and addressing comments on the draft project list from our technical working group, so staff from all of your agencies. This is a really important point in the study here. We really want to get this project list as right as we possibly can, and we had to ingest a lot of data and information to develop this. So definitely want a keen eye going through that project list and giving us recommended updates to it. Also in June and July, we'll be completing our air quality benefits section that looks at the potential impacts of trips shifted from vehicular to active transportation modes. So that is also ongoing. And then July through September, we'll be developing, advertising, and doing public engagement on our draft final plan document. So trying to wrap this up here in the next 3 to 4 months. And with that, I'll turn it back over and answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Chris. This is an informational item. Are there any questions, comments? Catherine? Nope. Yeah,
Sorry, one last comment. I know that much like the last plan that we looked at, there's not necessarily funding to implement any of this tomorrow. And data changes quickly sometimes with where growth is. And so and maybe this might be more for the PAG side of the house, I want to make sure that I understand that this can help us guide to where a new project might be, but it won't be limiting. If we have a different need for a different segment of bike lane, shared use path, sidewalk, whatever it may be, this is not going to be limiting. We'll still be able to put forth what we need at the time that funding becomes available.
Yes, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It's not limiting. I think the best way to explain it is that when we do the long range plan, we put buckets of money in for things that fall into these active transportation categories. So for sidewalks, for bike lanes, for multi-use paths and things like that. And sometimes those numbers are a continuation of what we've had in there for many cycles, but we'd like to have that number that's in the long range plan based off of analysis and based off of a way to determine what those needs are. Is it all encompassing? No, it's not. And we also know too that some of these projects that we're recommending in this plan will be done in the next 4 years. Some of them might be done in the next year or two. So when the decision's made on, which funding to pursue, all those variables will come into play. I mean, certainly we won't say, okay, the top 5 projects in the RATP are the ones we're going to go for funding for if there's either not a need for that project anymore. Let's say that project was already completed or there's already funding assigned to it. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to look at those variables, but I think the real goal is to have a better grasp of, what are we putting in our long range plan and is that based off of something real and tangible that we know is a need for the entire region. So, and that's why Chris and his team did spend quite a bit of time analyzing the plans that are already out there that you guys already have, including your CIPs, because we want to make sure that it is reflecting what you're planning for and what you're anticipating, but also filling some of those needs. So yeah, it's not meant to be a definitive, this is what we're gonna build and pursue funding for and limit it in any way.
I think that's excellent. And just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, like the county is going to be starting our transportation master plan shortly. And so, that we're going to want to use some of the data that's been used regionally. And so sharing data that you may have compiled for this study and other studies will make our long range plan better. And then it'll feed into the next RMAP so that's all kind of pointing in the same direction transportation wise. So we'll be in touch when we get to that point in our project.
Thank you, Catherine, and we look forward to seeing you guys put that together. And similar to what we did in the RMAP with like the Moves Tucson and then the Marana Transportation Master Plan, folding that all into what we're doing at the regional level is always a goal of what we're trying to do in our long range planning. But yeah, those data sets from this project, from microtransit, from the Acopia project and others that we've recently done are available and will continue to be available to our jurisdiction partners to use throughout any of your planning efforts. So of course, reach out to us and we'll get that stuff to you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Yes, any other questions, comments? I don't see any hands. All right. Well, again, thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Well, let's move on to item number 7. adjournment. Thank you, everybody. We are officially adjourned at 10:46.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.